From the heart of Orlando, Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad you could join me today in my beautiful neighborhood here in Central Florida. And we have a lot to cover today because we are at the heart of what is going on with the controversies in regards to what they have been calling the Russian collusion investigation. That's going to be breaking tomorrow morning. And a lot of people want to know, what is that all about? What is in the Mueller report? From the Cliff Notes version, we know, according to Attorney General Barr, that there was not anything there, as we had already, most of us had already understood to be there. There was nothing there. But we're going to see now the details. So there's a lot of people on the left who are looking to this Mueller report like it's the coming of the Ten Commandments. We will finally see the sacred document that gives millions of people their sense of meaning and purpose and togetherness. And that's the nature of the hallucinatory aspect of modern media, is that there's this kind of desire to always have a scapegoat, to always have a foreign boogeyman or an internal boogeyman. And the perfect scapegoats are the ones that have both an internal aspect and an external aspect. One foot in on the inside crowd and one foot on the outside crowd. And in that case, Trump is a perfect candidate for a scapegoat, because he's both the consummate, businessman in New York City, so he's an insider, but then he's got, international interests. And so if you can tar someone like that and say, well, you thought you knew this man, but in reality, he's crooked, he's a casino mogul, and that's why we should suspect that he might have had something to do with the Russian government. Well, then he's a classic perfect case for a scapegoat. And so it'll be interesting to see what the details are. I think that $35 million Mueller spent with highly conflicted, oftentimes people that had worked on the law firms for the Clinton Foundation. This is ridiculous. It's a joke. And yet still so much of the alleged free press will tell you that no, there was nothing conflicted about that. That's just some kind of right-wing blog that says there was a conflict of interest with the people investigating the Trump-Russia question. But still, we'll wait for the details tomorrow morning. But in the meantime, I'm excited about my guest here because he is someone who has actually interacted on a personal level with some of the people involved in the Russia collusion investigation for Trump. He's a former CIA agent. His name is John Kiriakou. Welcome to the program. How you doing?
Thanks so much for having me. Doing well, thanks.
Yeah, and I've read about your story, and I was able to kind of dive into some of the details, and I'm fascinated for a lot of topics that I think you can provide insights in. You're a whistleblower. You're someone who you came out and you went on television and you let the world know that indeed there was torture taking place in the CIA, and you ended up serving time for that. Isn't that correct?
That's true, yes. I went on ABC News in December of 2007, and I said that the CIA was torturing its prisoners, that torture was official U.S. government policy. It was not the result of a rogue, as the president had intimated. And I said that the policy had been personally approved by the president. And as you might imagine, the CIA didn't take well to that.
Now, what led you to reveal this? I mean, what was going on in your mind when you decided to reveal this?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I am a strong believer in the Constitution of the United States. I believe in the rule of law. Reasonable people can agree to disagree on policy, but if you don't like the policy, then you have to change the law. You can't just pretend that the law doesn't exist. And, we have an anti-torture law in this country. I'm not just talking about the McCain-Feinstein Amendment of 2015. We've got an anti-torture law that dates back to 1946. And we're also signatories, and not just signatories, but we were the drafters of the United Nations Convention Against Torture. And so I believed that it was my duty as a CIA officer to blow the whistle on what I believed to be waste, fraud, abuse, and illegality. And so that's what I did.
Now, how many years did you spend in the CIA and other, intel agencies?
I was in the CIA for 15 years, and most of that was as a counterterrorism operations officer.
Now, you were the head of counterterrorism for the CIA in Pakistan, correct?
Correct. In the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, I headed counterterrorism operations in Pakistan.
Can you give a layman some insight here? Why do we give billions of dollars to Pakistan and allow them to have nukes? And yet, was Osama bin Laden, was he just a few miles away from their main base? Is that right?
Yeah, Osama bin Laden was actually living in the Pakistani version of West Point. And you ask a very important and very good question. It's really the $64,000 question. Why do we give Pakistan billions and billions of dollars in economic and military aid when they are a nuclear power in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and are constantly on the brink of war with India, which is an important U.S. trading partner? And the truth is that the policy is very complicated, and we just prefer to pretend that these problems don't exist.
So is it like duck, duck, goose? We just kind of duck, duck, goose. Okay, you're the guys we're going to give nukes to. Everybody else we're going to sanction to destroy and make everybody think that they're like the worst place in the world. Is that how it works?
Welcome to Washington, because that's exactly how this city works. It's funny. You have a policy, and you would think that because you have a policy, you stick with it. The truth is that there's an exception to every policy. And so there's always a quid pro quo. We go to the Pakistanis and we say, if you do A, B, and C for us, we're going to pretend that you don't have nuclear weapons. And they say, that sounds like a good deal to us. And then we all just play this game.
Wow. I just don't understand. So did Pakistan, do they kind of work with the petrodollar system and everything, and that's why they're persona non grata versus Iran? Because I know Iran doesn't play ball when it comes to our oil interests and so forth. Is that a good quick and dirty cheat sheet for why those guys have nukes and we're supposed to be told every night that that's nothing to see here in Pakistan, but go ahead and let's vilify and destroy Iran, right?
I think no. I think the real reason is that the Pakistanis are perfectly willing to kneel down before us when we want them to. For example, the Pakistanis share a border with China, and in fact, they're very close to the Chinese politically. But if we want access to the Chinese border, maybe we want to put a listening post up there, they say, go ahead and have at it. We need access to the border with Iran in the south of Pakistan. That's an area called Baluchistan, where we have our drone base. They say, have at it. We tell them we need a staging area to go into Afghanistan. They welcome us and give us a base for it. And then at the same time, they come to us and say, look, we've done all these things for you. We've given you these bases. We let you spy on the Chinese and the Iranians and the Afghans and whomever else we want to spy on. So what you're going to do for us is you're going to look the other way while we build this nuclear weapon. And also you're going to look the other way as we arm these Kashmiri separatists and Kashmiri terrorists who are going to attack the Marriott in Mumbai and attack the Mumbai Jewish Center and kill Jews there. And so we do. We look the other way. And then when push comes to shove, we point the finger at al-Qaeda, and we pretend that the Pakistani government had nothing to do with it.
So wait a second. Our geniuses in D.C., they're giving billions of dollars to these guys. They have this deep connection relationship, and they didn't know that Osama bin Laden was in their West Point, their equivalent of West Point over there?
That stretches credulity, doesn't it?
So
I was always of the opinion that the Pakistanis knew that Osama bin Laden was there. You have to be a mental defective to not know Osama bin Laden was there. Everybody knew that he wasn't in some cave in Afghanistan, that he was probably in one of the major cities, because all of the other al-Qaeda fighters that we had caught and al-Qaeda leaders that we had caught were in Pakistan's major cities. We caught Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in Rawalpindi. We caught Ramzi bin Ashib in Karachi. We caught Omar al-Baluch in Karachi. These guys are in big cities. They're in safe houses. They're in apartments. They're not in caves anywhere. And so we in the CIA always assumed he was living comfortably somewhere in Pakistan, and certainly he was. Now, let me qualify that, too, by saying that I worked very, very closely with Pakistani intelligence services when I was living there and assigned there, and I was always of the opinion that there were two parallel Pakistani intelligence services. There were the counter-terrorism guys that I worked with, who were educated in the UK or in the US, and they loved us, and they would lay down their lives for us. And then there were the other guys in their headquarters with the long, bushy beards, who had come of age in Afghanistan, who created the Taliban, who would give you the stink eye whenever you'd go over to their headquarters for meetings. And it's like these two sides of the same organization were working against each other and working against us at the same time.
Wow. Whoa. And that makes my head spin. That makes my head spin. So it's almost like if you paid, it was kind of like a pay for play, like, look, if you give us $2 billion in aid, you get this. And then if you want to chip in another billion, America, we'll let you know what's under door number 1, where there's Osama bin Laden right next to our West. It's just like,
you know what? That's a really good way to put it. And the short answer is yes. That's exactly what it is.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're with John Kiriakou, former CIA agent, and you're listening to A Neighbor's Choice with David Gornoski. Don't go anywhere. More on the other side. Hi, I'm David Gornoski, and welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm your political exorcist. I'm here to cast out all of the negative spirits of groupthink in our lives and reclaim our country, neighbor to neighbor, for the message of nonviolence, peace, love, and working together, all grounded in the principles of personhood, the idea that the individual person is at the fulcrum of everything that matters in terms of our law and what we should allow in our own civic society. And I'm joined right now by a very fascinating guest. His name is John Kiriakou. He's a former CIA agent. He was the head of the counter-terrorism unit for them in Pakistan during the height of a lot of the things going on over there. And he became a whistleblower. He decided that he had seen evidence of torture, and he did not believe that that was an ethical thing for him to be a part of, and he decided to speak out about it. Did you actually see the activity yourself, or you just knew about it through the system or whatever?
No, I did not see it myself. What happened was, when I finished my tour in Pakistan, I returned to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. And I was in the cafeteria one day, and a senior officer with whom I worked came up to me and very casually said, "Hey, I'm glad I ran into you. I wanted to ask, do you want to be certified in the use of enhanced interrogation techniques?" I had never heard that term before. This was May the 6th of 2002. And I said, "Enhanced interrogation techniques, what's that mean?" And he described these 10 techniques. And I said, "Ooh, that sounds like a torture program." And he said, "No, it's not torture. We got it approved by the White House. We got it approved by the National Security Council, the Justice Department." I said, "I don't know, man. That sounds like torture. And torture's a slippery slope. I don't think I want to be involved with that." As it turned out, they had asked 14 of us operations officers, and I was the only one who said no, I'm very sorry to say. And so on the strength of the work that I did in Pakistan, we had captured Abu Zubaydah, who we believed at the time was the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. I got promoted, and I became the executive assistant to the CIA's deputy director. And so in that position, I had access to literally every operation that the CIA was running around the world. It's a very unusual position. And so as soon as they began torturing Abu Zubaydah and others, I was the recipient of the cables coming back from the secret sites, the secret prisons. And you know, even inside the agency, we were fooled because the reporting was being done by 2 contract psychologists, Mitchell and Jessen, who were reporting that the torture was actually successful, and that Abu Zubaydah was giving us information that was saving American lives and disrupting attacks. That turned out to be a lie. what they had done was that they copied information that Abu Zubaydah had freely given the FBI. And because the FBI computer system and the CIA computer system had no connectivity, we in the CIA didn't know that the information had already been reported to the FBI, and Mitchell and Jessen were lying and saying that they had collected it. We didn't know that until 2009. And so we were getting this reporting back saying everything's copacetic. He cracked, he broke, he cried, he wet himself, he gave us all this information. We accidentally made his heart stop. We had to revive him, and it was just it was torture for nothing. It was a violation of the law. It was a violation of the Constitution, and it resulted in nothing but a black eye for our country.
So what would make them want to lie about it? I mean, what if they just, I mean, because they were already under fire about it internally or something?
Well,
or
I can tell you exactly what made them lie. They had signed a $108 million contract. And so they had to make sure that everybody in headquarters in a position to have oversight over that contract believed that the techniques were working, because they wanted to collect that $108 million.
What did they need that money for? What was that going to?
Into their pockets.
For what? To do?
Well, that's how Mitchell and Jessen got rich.
Okay.
They had this organization, Mitchell and Jessen Associates, and what they did is they reverse engineered the Air Force's SEER program. That's the program where we teach our pilots how to withstand torture if they're shot down behind enemy lines. They reverse engineered it, and they used it to create an offensive torture program, promising the CIA's leadership that it would work and that it would disrupt attacks. And so we gave them $108 million because they had made these promises, and by God, they were going to make sure that we believed that the program was working.
So waterboarding as a technique, not that they invented it, but waterboarding was something sold to the CIA from a private contractor.
Correct.
That was their thing. Whoa. I always just had I always just thought like it was just some kind of technique that they had in their back pocket from the medieval times. And like, hey, let's pull this out. That'll get it to work.
Well, that's where it originated. It originated in medieval China.
Oh, wow.
And was used as recently as the Vietnam War. I mean, you go through history, and it was used by the Belgians in the Congo. It was used in medieval China. It was used, my God, during the Second World War. And I'll tell you something. This is one of the things that really made me decide to go public. In 1946, we executed Japanese soldiers who had waterboarded American POWs. We executed them. This was a death penalty offense. In January of 1968, the Washington Post ran a front-page photograph of an American soldier waterboarding a North Vietnamese prisoner. On the same day that photo ran, the Secretary of Defense, Robert S. McNamara, ordered an investigation. That soldier was arrested. He was charged with torture. He was convicted and sentenced to 20 years at hard labor in Leavenworth. Well, the law never changed. We changed. So in 1946, this was a death penalty act. In 1968, it was worth 20 years at hard labor. But somehow in 2002, it was magically patriotic and perfectly legal to do when the law didn't change. And that made no sense to me.
And the justification, of course, was that 9/11 happened, and therefore all stops had to be, thrown out the window, all brakes.
Exactly. I remember George Tenet saying that Osama bin Laden had promised that he was planning another attack that would dwarf 9/11, and George was panicked at the notion that there would be two such attacks on his watch, and that's why he was willing to do literally anything to stop the next attack, including giving Mitchell and Jessen $108 million to torture people.
Why did they have to pay a contractor to do it? Why couldn't they just hire a consultant to teach the CIA agents how to do it?
Well, that's kind of been an ongoing debate. Why? Why did they bring in outsiders to do it? And there are a couple of theories, although none of the principals have ever really said. I remember meeting Mitchell and Jessen in CIA headquarters in October of 2001, just after the attacks. And the reason they came to my attention is that there's a rule at the CIA that contractors are not allowed to have private offices, but these guys got private offices. And I remember saying, hey, who are the stiffs over there moving into the private offices? Oh, I don't know. They must be somebody because they're contractors. They have green badges instead of blue badges. So they got private offices. They must be big shots. Well, there were a couple of different theories as to why they were hired. One of the theories is that they had some kind of contact with the Deputy Director for Science and Technology, who introduced them to the head of counterterrorism, and they were ready to go. So the CIA wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel and start creating this program from scratch. They had already done it, and they were ready to implement it right then and there. The other theory is that this way you weren't putting CIA officers in direct danger. These contractors were people who had decided this is what they wanted to do, and they were doing it for money, not for any other reason. And so if there was going to be legal fallout, they can handle their own doggone legal fallout, and there wouldn't be a congressional investigation that would end up pointing the finger at CIA officers.
Interesting. We're speaking with John Kiriakou, who's former CIA agent who was involved with, he became a whistleblower that's really revealed a lot of what was going on with the torture programs that we were told were not torture. But let's kind of whittle this down. Why did they choose the waterboarding technique as their favorite torture technique?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And the rules were very clear that they were not supposed to begin with waterboarding. Waterboarding was supposed to be the final punishment, right? If you couldn't get any information using any other technique, at the very end, you should go to waterboarding. Well, Mitchell and Jessen were so excited to see the implementation of their program that they began with waterboarding. And there were other things that they did, too, that were patently illegal.
And what did they do? Did they get like a bonus every time they waterboarded or something? Was this like a sales commission?
They got the ability to write a cable to headquarters saying, oh, we did X, Y, and Z, and we waterboarded him, and he was frothing at the mouth, and his heart stopped, and he was crying and begging, and all of which was true. And it made them look like true tough guys.
Where do they find these guys at? Are they like hiding in a Siberian tundra wilderness? They just work?
Pretty much. They were hiding at a university in eastern Washington State.
Oh, Lord. I wouldn't want to drink their water. My goodness. So what in the world? It's just hard to wrap my mind around this. So they picked this waterboarding technique, right? And
right.
they just flipped through like a medieval torture manuscript from China and just like a scroll and unrolled it and say, "Well, that looks really nasty. Let's try this one."
Essentially, yes. That's basically what they did. But there were other things, too. And there were actually techniques that I always believed were worse than waterboarding. One was very easy. It was sleep deprivation. You know how hard it is to stay awake. Well, the American Psychological Association tells us that people begin to lose their minds at day 7 with no sleep. They begin to die at day 9, right? But Mitchell and Jessen were authorized to keep prisoners awake for up to 12 days. And what they ended up doing was so harming people with sleep deprivation that they actually did lose their minds, and they're unable to participate in their own defenses.
Wow.
So here these guys are at Guantanamo. They're certifiably insane because of this experience, and they're unable to assist their own attorneys defending them. So I always thought that was worse than waterboarding. Waterboarding at least wasn't permanent, other than when your heart stopped beating. And the other one was called the cold cell. That is where the prisoner was stripped naked. He was chained to an eye bolt in the ceiling so that he couldn't sit or lay down or get comfortable in any way. His cell was chilled to 30 degrees. I'm sorry, it was chilled to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And then every hour, a CIA officer would go into the cell and throw a bucket of ice water on him. And we actually killed 2 prisoners doing that. We killed them with hypothermia. They essentially froze to death.
I know there was a popular thought that the waterboarding cannot kill you. Is that true?
No, it can kill you because water actually does get down the windpipe, and you can drown. You can drown with just a little bit of water. The thing is they had CIA physicians there observing the waterboarding. We used to jokingly, it was kind of dark humor, but jokingly call them Dr. Mengele. So you have Dr. Mengele sitting by. Every time Abu Zubaydah's heart would stop beating, he would revive him. They'd give him a day to recover, and then they'd waterboard him again.
What happened to this individual? I don't know his story. Zebedee, how'd you say it?
He was transferred from one secret prison to another. He ended up going to 4 or 5 different secret prisons around the world. And in 2005, he was transferred to Guantanamo, and he's been there ever since, held incommunicado. And we know from the Senate torture report that he will never be released, ever, under any circumstances, and that in the event of his death, he is to be cremated and his ashes scattered into the sea.
Wow! So they don't want no one to. He's in a chamber of no anything. He can't communicate.
And let me add the postscript to that. As it turns out, Abu Zubaydah was not the number 3 in Al Qaeda. Our information was wrong. This was the wrong guy.
It's a different. Those are like 2 of the same names.
He and a first cousin had exactly the same name.
Are you serious? Wait a second. This is just his cousin?
Yeah, see, this was the topic of my 3rd book.
Tell us the name of the book, by the way, so we can keep it.
Oh, sure. It's called, oh my God, I've written so many books I can't think of the title now. It's called The Convenient Terrorist, Abu Zubaydah and the Weird Wonderland of America's Secret Wars. Abu Zubaydah...
Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're speaking with John Kiriakou, CIA whistleblower, and this is fascinating stuff. Don't go anywhere, folks. We're learning what's going on A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm David Gornoski. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm David Gornoski. I'm speaking with John Kiriakou, who is a CIA whistleblower. He's now on the outside, but he had a decorated career in there before he saw what was going on with their torture behavior and activity and decided to speak out. And he paid for it. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. But I just wanted to follow up. You had said that this target of this waterboarding and other torture practices, Abu Zubaydah, was the wrong guy, the wrong Abu?
Yeah, the Abu Zubaydah that we caught was certainly a bad guy. He ran what was called the House of Martyrs training facility and safe house in Peshawar, Pakistan. But he never joined Al Qaeda, and he never pledged loyalty or fealty to Osama bin Laden. There was a cousin, a first cousin with the same name, Abu Zubaydah, and he was actually in and out of the United States. Well, as soon as 9/11 happened, he assumed correctly that the FBI and the CIA would be looking for him. And as soon as the 9/11 attacks took place, he fled to Jordan, and he went underground, and we were never able to find him. But not knowing that there were 2 different guys with the same name,
oh man!
If you're collecting information from NSA, FBI, CIA on both of these guys, and you think it's one guy, this looks like a terrorist Superman.
Right.
And so we finally tracked one of the Abu Zubaydahs down to Faisalabad, Pakistan, and on the evening of March 22nd, 2002, we busted down the door with battering rams, and we grabbed him and everybody else inside, and the rest is history.
So probably, I'm just imagining half the torture was them trying to get him to admit that he was the right Abu. He was like, no, you've got the wrong guy.
Absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And the thing is it took us years to realize that we had made this mistake. But by then, he had been tortured. He had been exposed to secret prisons. He was in Guantanamo. And now he knows too much. And so he can't be released. So here you've got this guy who has never been charged with a crime, right? He's never been charged with a crime, but he'll never go free. And to me, that's just not the American way.
So if there was, so he was the wrong Abu, but he did do some bad stuff, you said. So if there was evidence that he did these bad stuff, would that be, obviously I'm not trying to say that, that warrants what he's going through, but... Sure. Would it be a relatively similar stay for what he was, if you could pin the actual stuff he did do and prove evidence?
No, he had never actually committed a terrorist attack. So he was involved in training and logistics.
For terrorists
of terrorists, yes. So if we had known that there were 2 of them and we caught him, he probably would have done a good 10 years or maybe even 15 years in prison or in Guantanamo or whatever, and he would have been released by now.
And if he had sold marijuana, he would have been in prison for life, so that's for sure.
Oh, you're so right.
So, man, this is like a house, a carnival house of mirrors and bizarre to just look into this stuff. We've
made repeated terrible mistakes that have affected the lives of innocent people.
Was it the case that Osama bin Laden denied? Isn't it true that he denied that he was involved when it first came out? That when the news of the 9/11 attacks happened.
Oh no, he didn't deny it. In fact, he issued an audio recording to Al Jazeera in the weeks after 9/11, saying that this was punishment for the U.S., his words, polluting the land of the two holy mosques, which means having troops based in Saudi Arabia, and this was our punishment. And that's when he said that he was planning an attack that would dwarf 9/11.
Right. No, I knew he came out eventually and said he did it, but I thought there was like one statement he made where he's like, "Oh no, I didn't do that," and then he changed his stance on that. Was that's not?
You may be thinking about a statement that came out of the Pentagon right after 9/11, very briefly accusing Hezbollah of doing it.
Okay.
And saying that it wasn't bin Laden, that it was Hezbollah, and then Hezbollah, and this was really out of character, came out and said, "Whoa, we don't like you guys, but we didn't have anything to do with this."
Wow. So how did it, if we had this relationship with Pakistan and you were the head of counter-terrorism there, from what years were you over there in Pakistan?
I was there from, it was a short tour because it was so dangerous. We were cycling in and out. So I was there for 7 months I was there from January to May, and then again from June to August of 2002.
Wow.
Yeah, it was dangerous.
I'm looking here. This is an article from CNN.com. Bin Laden says he wasn't behind the attacks. In a statement issued to the Arabic satellite channel Al Jazeera, this is CNN.com, based in Qatar, bin Laden said the U.S. government has consistently blamed me for being behind every occasion its enemies attack it. I would like to assure the world that I did not plan the recent attacks, which seem to have been planned by people for personal reasons. And he's been living in the Islamic Emirates. He said, so this is September 17th, 2001. So why did he deny it at first? I don't understand.
Right. You know what? We were doing 24-hour shifts back then, and I must have been just so preoccupied with finding terrorists, I just didn't pay attention to that.
Isn't that? I just find it's weird that he denied it at first. 6 days later, and then he changes, I guess, his tune shortly after and starts accepting it. So I don't understand that.
Crazy.
It's weird. But anyways,
the funny thing about bin Laden too is that he had literally zero religious credentials. He was a nobody. He was the son of one of the wealthiest men in Saudi Arabia, Abdurrahman bin Laden. The family is worth tens of billions of dollars. They're in charge of all the biggest construction projects in the kingdom. They build airports and ports and hospitals.
So he's kind of like their version of Trump over there.
Even bigger, way bigger than Trump. And the old man had 110 sons. So Osama was one of the younger sons, and he was sort of the one that went bad. There are probably 6 bin Laden family members who live here in the United States permanently. Beverly Hills, a lot of them live in Miami, and they wanted nothing to do with their brother. They had a rough time here in the States after the 9/11 attacks, and almost all of them left the country for a year or two and then just started to come back by 2003, 2004.
Wow. It's fascinating stuff. I want to go on the other side. We're going to take a quick commercial break in just a minute here, but I wanted to, on the other side, kind of go into your thoughts on the Assange story and kind of unpack that because, you're a whistleblower and you paid the price. You spent how many years in prison because of what you did?
I was there for 23 months.
23 months. We have a lot of people on our program that call in for nonviolent victimless crimes. They call in from prison, and they discuss their experience of what prison's like. So on the other side, with John Kiriakou, I want to ask you what your experience was like in prison and more about whistleblowing on the other side. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. Don't go anywhere. A Neighbor's Choice Radio is back, and I'm your host, David Gornoski, here with John Kiriakou, former CIA agent, and we're exploring a lot of fascinating topics, and we're going to have John on again some more to unpack. He's got a wealth of knowledge and a part of American government that a lot of people know very little of, including myself. And I guess that's the way they've designed it, of course. It's the CIA. But, we should know what they're doing. They're supposed to be our public servants, but, they're over here, taking out Chinese medieval torture techniques on people and got the wrong guy, got the wrong Abu, at least in this case that you've been exploring on the show with us today. So I wanted to kind of go briefly through, we have people call in from prison for nonviolent victimless behaviors. And of course, so you tell the truth about the torture. What was their argument, that you hurt someone, that you endangered someone's life by saying that?
No, what they argued was that the information was classified, and so they charged me with 3 counts of espionage, if you can imagine such a thing.
So how would they have proven that in court? Like, what would be their case? What would be their argument? What was their best argument that you were doing espionage?
Well, there's this phrase when discussing classified information that it is currently and appropriately classified. My contention was that you can't classify a crime. It's actually a crime in the United States to classify something just because it's a crime or because it causes embarrassment to the government. But they wanted to go to the mat, and not because they necessarily wanted to prosecute John Kiriakou. The point was to frighten any other would-be whistleblower from going public. So they could say, you see what we did to this guy? You want the same thing to happen to you? Then you keep your big mouth shut. But my attorneys told me in the very beginning, look, this is way bigger than you. This case isn't about you. This case is about freedom of speech, it's about government accountability, and it's about transparency. You exposed a crime. You embarrassed them, all the way up to the president, and they don't like to be embarrassed. And so we decided to fight. I was going to go to trial, and I pleaded not guilty. I was facing 45 years in prison, and so my attorneys received discovery from the Justice Department, and we asked the judge to declassify 70 cables necessary for me to defend myself, to prove that this was a crime, that the torture program was a crime, and so it was illegal to make it a classified program. And so the judge, we blocked off 2 days for the hearings, and we went into court, and the judge said, I'm going to make this easy for everybody, and I'm going to deny all 70 of these motions. My attorneys flipped out. Objection, objection, objection. And then, because it was a national security case, the prosecution was allowed to ask for something called a Part 13 conversation, which means an in-camera conversation, a private conversation with a judge in her chambers without my attorneys present. That's legal only in a national security case. And so the prosecutors went back there with the judge. They were back there for 20 minutes. They came back out. I have no idea what they said about me back there. And the judge looked at me and she said, I'm denying all 70 of these motions. And she looked at me and she says, don't make me take this to trial. Well, she just undercut my whole defense. So I have to go to trial because the best that the government said they would do was 10 years in a penitentiary. And I said, I'm not going to do 10 minutes. And so I told them that I was rejecting their 10 years, and I was going to go to trial, and I was going to testify on my own behalf. And in that testimony, I may have to find myself talking about some of the hideous crimes against humanity and war crimes that I witnessed in my 15 years in CIA counterterrorism, that I had to defend myself. And then they came back and they said, okay, 23 months. Well, the bottom line is the government wins 98.2% of its cases, according to ProPublica. So do you roll the dice knowing that you have a 1.8% chance to win? Mm-hmm. Do you take the 23 months, or do you gamble and risk getting 18 to 24 years, which is what my lawyers believed I would get if I had lost? So I took the deal. Besides that, I had already spent $1.1 million on my defense. It wiped me out. I went bankrupt. And I still owe my lawyers $880,000 that they're never going to see. So as my attorneys told me in the very beginning, this is more than just about you. This is about scaring everybody else in government who might be thinking about reporting a crime.
Well, yeah, they used you as a public scapegoat to send a message to that we're angry at the public and we're going to take it out on you because you opened up this crisis of humiliation and revealing of our sins and our wickedness in high places. And so that's why they had to make an example of you. So you went to prison for, 2 years then?
Yeah, 2 years. Short of 2 years.
Did you receive health effects or PTSD because of the experience?
Oh, you bet I did. The funny thing, too, is that I was the victim of 2 assassination attempts in my career, once in Athens and once in a Middle Eastern country that I'm not allowed to discuss. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have PTSD from 2 assassination attempts. I didn't have PTSD from breaking down doors and chasing Al-Qaeda in Pakistan. But boy, I had major PTSD when I got back from prison.
Wow. So you had threats of violence against you and stuff
No, actually, the prisoners welcomed me. They adopted me, especially the Italians. And when I say Italian, I mean like with air quotes. Italians named Gambino and Lucchese and Bonanno, etc. And it was because I hate the FBI as much as they do. But it was the guards. It was the guards that were always after me.
That reminds me of the Stanford prison experiment, huh?
Oh, yes.
So you lived that experiment.
Oh, yes, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that experiment was exactly correct in its findings.
Wow.
People become monsters.
Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that just for being a patriot and trying to keep your government accountable.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to have you on again sometime. John Kiriakou,
I look forward to that.
I'm glad you're with your family now and keep telling the truth. And I know you're in a new Ai Weiwei documentary. So what's the name of that movie?
It's called Yours Truly.
Yours Truly. Ai Weiwei's new movie, Yours Truly, has John Kiriakou. JohnKiriakou.com, folks. Thanks again, John.
Thank you.
You've been listening to another episode of A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm David Gornoski. Godspeed.